The red dust of Mars swirled outside the observation window as Emma Martinez tightened the final bolt on the interior framework. Beside her, Jason Chin checked the structural integrity readings on his handheld scanner, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The Valkyrians think we're insane," Jason muttered, glancing toward the neighboring dome where their alien counterparts had gathered to watch the human construction project with what could only be described as amusement. Emma wiped the sweat from her forehead and smiled. "Let them laugh. They'll understand soon enough." The colony on Mars had been a joint effort between humanity and the Valkyrian Commonwealth, a species that had mastered interstellar travel centuries before humans had even reached their own moon. When Earth had finally achieved faster-than-light capabilities, the Valkyrians had been there, offering partnership and guidance with the kind of patient superiority that came from technological advancement. The habitation domes were Valkyrian designs, elegant, efficient, and proven across a dozen worlds. Each dome consisted of a single transparent aluminum shell reinforced with energy barriers, capable of maintaining pressure and temperature while filtering radiation. The Valkyrians had built thousands of them. They knew what worked, so when Emma had proposed building a second wall inside the human dome, the Valkyrian engineer Thalzian had been genuinely confused. "Redundancy is inefficient," Thalzian had said, his translator rendering his clicking speech into flat, emotionless English. "Our dome design has a failure rate of 0.0003%. Your species should trust proven technology." But Emma had insisted, and the human colony administrator had backed her up. Resources were allocated, and construction began. Now, 3 weeks later, the second wall stood complete, an inner shell of reinforced polymer and steel, creating a gap of nearly 2 meters between it and the outer dome. The Valkyrians had watched the entire process with what their body language experts interpreted as bemusement that Jason's scanner beeped. "Emma, we're getting some unusual readings from the magnetic field outside. Solar activity is spiking." Emma nodded, her eyes fixed on the monitoring station. "I see it. Alert the Valkyrian dome. This could be significant." Within minutes, the sky above the Martian colony turned into a light show. The solar storm hit with unexpected ferocity, particle radiation slamming into the planet's thin atmosphere and creating auroras that would have been beautiful if they weren't so dangerous. The energy barriers on both domes flickered and strained under the assault. In the Valkyrian dome, Thalzian and his team rushed to reinforce their energy systems, channeling more power to maintain the barrier. The dome held, as designed, but the power consumption was astronomical. In the human dome, alarms blared as the outer energy barrier began to fail in sections. Emma and Jason worked in synchronized efficiency, their fingers flying across control panels. "Outer barrier at 40%. Jason called out. "Redirecting power to critical sections," Emma responded. "But it won't be enough. Initiate protocol redundancy." Jason's hand hovered over the emergency switch for just a moment before he slammed it down. The second wall came alive. What the Valkyrians hadn't understood, what their centuries of efficient, minimalist engineering had never taught them, was that humans built for failure. Not because they expected it, but because they planned for it. The space between the two walls wasn't empty. It was filled with an independent atmosphere system, backup power generators, and most importantly, a network of pressure sensors and emergency sealant dispensers. When the outer dome's energy barrier failed completely in the northern quadrant, the second wall held. The pressure sensors detected the breach immediately, and industrial-grade sealant foam deployed in seconds, creating a temporary plug while the inner wall's own energy barrier, running on separate power systems, maintained habitability. The humans inside didn't even lose pressure. In the Valkyrian dome, power systems strained to keep their single barrier active. Thalzian watched his displays with growing concern as energy reserves depleted at an alarming rate. The dome would hold. The mathematics were sound, but they would be running on emergency power for weeks. Then his communicator chirped. "Thalzian, this is Emma Martinez. Our outer barrier has failed in multiple sections, but we're stable. We have excess power capacity. Do you need assistance?" The Valkyrian engineer stood silent for a long moment, his compound eyes fixed on the readout showing the human dome's power signature. It was impossible. They had suffered a complete barrier failure and yet consumed less energy than his intact dome. "How?" Thalzian asked simply to Emma's voice came through with what the translator interpreted as warmth. Because when the first wall fails, the second wall keeps us alive. And when we're not fighting to maintain a failing barrier, we can redirect that power to keeping our people safe. Would you like us to extend our secondary barrier to cover your dome's weakest quadrant? Pride warred with pragmatism in Thalzian's mind. Pride lost. Yes, thank you. Over the next 6 hours, the human engineering team worked with their Valkyrian counterparts to stabilize both domes. Jason directed the extension of their backup systems, while Emma coordinated with Thalzian on integrating their different technologies. It wasn't elegant, and it certainly wasn't efficient by Valkyrian standards, but it worked. When the solar storm finally passed and the Martian sky returned to its normal rust-red hue, Thalzian requested a tour of the human dome's double-wall system. Emma and Jason walked him through every redundant system, every backup protocol, every inefficient safety measure. Your species builds as if expecting disaster, Thalzian observed. Jason grinned. We don't expect disaster. We just remember it. Emma added, our history taught us that the best-laid plans can fail, so we build our plans to fail safely. Thalzian's translator was silent for several seconds as he processed this philosophy. Finally, he spoke. The Valkyrian Commonwealth has built colonies on 47 worlds using our dome technology. We have never lost a dome to structural failure. That's impressive, Emma said genuinely. But, Thalzian continued, we have lost 6 colonies to circumstances our designs did not anticipate. Your second wall. It is not about the wall itself, is it? Jason and Emma exchanged glances. Emma answered, it's about building for the universe we have, not the universe we want. The wall is just a symbol. 3 months later, the Valkyrian Commonwealth issued new construction guidelines for all colonial domes. The addendum was brief. Redundancy protocols recommended. Consult human engineering standards. Thalzian never laughed at human over-engineering again. Instead, he became the Commonwealth's leading advocate for what he called resilient redundancy design. His first proposal was a second wall for every existing Valkyrian colony to eye in the human dome on Mars. Emma added a plaque to the inner wall. It read simply, the second wall isn't for when things go right. It's for when they don't. And in the vast expanse of space, where countless species built their monuments to efficiency and elegance, humanity continued to build walls within walls, backups for backups, and plans for when plans failed, because that's what humans did. They built to survive. HFY